I'd like to share a few words about Tabb next. And Tabb, you are here, right? There you are, all the way over there. So Dr. Tabb Prissel is an assistant professor at Purdue University, where he studies the igneous evolution of the moon and other rocky planets. An experimental petrologist by training, Tabb has made major contributions to our understanding of lunar magnesium sweet magmatism through his analyses of Apollo samples and lunar meteorites. His work integrates lab-based experiments with orbital data and geochemical models, shedding light on the moon's early magmatic history. Before joining Purdue, Dr. Prissel was a NASA civil servant and research scientist at Johnson Space Center. His commitment to community service is equally distinguished. He serves as the Workforce Development Chair for the Lunar Exploration Analysis Group and as liaison to the Next Generation Lunar Scientists and Engineers Group that we heard Jake talk about, ensuring that early career scientists have strong representation and mentorship opportunities within the field. As vice chair of the League Science Goals theme on lunar origin and early history, Tabb has led collaborative efforts to establish research priorities for NASA's Planetary Science Division. His leadership, scientific excellence, and dedication to inclusivity make him a truly deserving recipient. So please help me congratulate Dr. Tabb Prissel. Yeah, and here's the award. And Christina, would you like to come up here too? We can get a picture of the three of us, and then Tabb will give his acceptance. Okay. All right. Thank you. Congratulations. This is awesome. My pleasure. Absolutely. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much to Greg and Christina SSERVI, the awards committee, for considering me. As Ariel mentioned, looking at my fellow recipients and then the previous awardees of the Niebur Award, I feel immensely honored to be among that list and join them with Jake and Ariel. Also to have my name recognized with Susan Niebur and her contributions to the field and also to the development of our workforce is also a huge honor for me. I was asked, I didn't know, what to really present on. And they said, why don't you talk about, how you got into science? And that's a little bit of the story. I guess another part of the story that I decided to share today will be how I guess, stayed in science. But first, I want to recognize two advisors, my academic advisors, and Russ Colson. I didn't like science growing up, truthfully. I thought I went to school for graphic design or music industry. And I took a historical geology class with Russ at Minnesota State University Moorhead. And Russ is the one who told us that geologists are storytellers. And actually, he first jumped up onto the table in the front of the classroom and pretended with all of his heart to be a velociraptor. But then he told us geologists are storytellers. It was a gripping moment, so we were listening. But with my interest in art and music, and especially as these soulful forms of communication, the storytelling of geoscience immediately resonated with me. And so that was the first time I opened myself up to learning how to read and tell the stories of the earth, sky, and planets. And so I wouldn't be here without Russ. And it's amazing what one teacher can do. Nor would Steve have had to endure 5 years of my obsessing over the moon and MG Suite. But like any good advisor, Steve was always quick to set wind in my sail and let me drag him to the moon. And more often than I'd like to admit, pulling me back down to earth with some of my crazy ideas. But what's really impactful to me is Steve and I's relationship quickly, developed. Steve was a great mentor for me and a champion for me early in my career and to this day. And both Russ and Steve, not long after the mentorship developed, that we become friends. So thank you. It was a really exciting time to be at Brown University as a lunar petrologist. My dissertation committee was built with an ensemble cast. And so it was fantastic. I got to learn experimental petrology from Steve and also Mac Rutherford and his, legacy in lunar science. But then we were also placing our results into the regional or even global geologic context with Carly Peters and remote sensing observations. And then, of course, with Jim, I remained process-driven and able to take what we can learn on one planet and maybe go somewhere else and learn something new based on that. And through the comparative planetology perspective, thinking about each planet sort of being its own sort of unique experimental constraints. So thank you to those guys in my dissertation committee, but Brown was filled with many great teachers: Reed Cooper, Yan Liang, Alberto Saul, and of course Paul Hess. And friendships can make any place feel like home. And so I was very fortunate again to have a great cohort of grad students to learn alongside of, and so although I don't have pictures of everyone, these were kind of the most wholesome and least incriminating. And so you could say my research career kind of started with Spinel and performing reaction experiments between MG Suite liquids and anorthite or synthetic equivalents of those, and looking at the reaction products and the Spinel chemistry that forms during that reaction as a simulation to melt rock reactions on the moon. And then, of course, tying that back to some of the surface observations and remote sensing that Carly Peters and Deepak Dinger and others were finding, both the near side and the far side of the moon. And so by linking those experiments to both the Apollo collection sample return and also the orbital remote sensing database, we were able to develop a new proxy for ancient MG Suite magmatism across the surface of the moon. And this was so exciting because it had all these cascading implications. And I have this huge notebook of all these fun ideas to sort of explore. Is creep required for MG Suite petrogenesis? It looks like it's on the near side, but we see MG Suite on the far side. What type of global emplacement process puts these magmas all over the moon? Unfortunately, this is where my career kind of took a big deviation, where I had a postdoc lined up that unfortunately fell through last minute. And so I was left sprinting towards unemployment, no funding and no institutional support. And so I joke, but my first postdoc was serving margaritas and making tableside guacamole. But when faced with the choice between unemployment and employment, money's always going out, so you need money in. And so I had to take a full-time job waiting tables day and night. And if I could get someone to cover for me to not close during the lunch shift, I usually had about 2 to 2.5 hours in between the lunch and dinner shift. And so I would sprint across the street, go to the coffee shop, and write and research. And one of the contributions there was deciding, after I'd saved up enough tip money, I wasn't bad at waiting tables, I was able to pay out of pocket and decided to invest in myself to go to the New Views in the Moon 2 workshop. And so this is an abstract title there, and 7542 Harlan Walk was our apartment address. And that's me and our dog Declan on the floor of our apartment. Those who know me best know that I love to work on the floor. And hoodie, elbow sleeves are all worn out. Anyway, this was a good idea. Anyone who has invested in themselves know you have to make it count, because that money's going towards you. And so I had a great experience at that workshop and got involved with 3 different chapters on the New Views of the Moon 2. And for me, a budding petrologist, this was absolutely a dream come true to be involved in these chapters in a project like this, because of the state at which the original New Views of the Moon was during my time in grad school, where I literally tore through it, you know. And so I can only hope that these chapters and the others in there suffer a similar fate with the next generation. Another contribution, working and writing in between those shifts, was our study of MG Suite volcanism. And this is just based on the basic principle that kind of regardless of the range of parental melt compositions you would assume for the MG Suite, they were all much more buoyant than the Mare basalts, especially the high titanium magmas, which have clearly erupted onto the surface. And so why are all the MG Suite samples we're looking at predominantly plutonic? And so we came up with a predictive model based on this, looking at buoyancy-driven ascent and hydrostatic ascent models, to come up with a little bit of a predictive model based on the GRAIL data that had just come out on where we might find MG Suite volcanics, and that if we continued looking or continued sample return, we should see these extrusive equivalents in the sample collection. And so this has been really, really exciting to now see the next generation of scientists going back and revisiting the Apollo collection, seeing the ANCSA initiative take its route in several different directions, but finding examples of what looks like very much MG Suite, but basaltic or extrusive volcanic textures. And it was a lot of fun getting to work with Amanda and Jess on the top paper there. And Chris invited me to his dissertation presentation. And this is really meaningful to me, not because they're citing our work or our study, but because they're referencing kind of this moment in my life where I didn't know what was going to happen. And I got really good at making guacamole. And so it's very meaningful to me to see that and just be involved and watch it happen and unfold. Thankfully, you know, after some 54 rejections later or something, I have the list. I have 3 individuals I want to thank, though, that were a turning point for me to help kind of get me back on track and could see that I was fighting, wanting to stay in the science community, and gave me a shot. So the first is Juliana Gross. I got to start working with Juliana at Rutgers University while she was still there, now our Artemis curation lead, thankfully. But she was awesome. I got to learn a lot about meteorite analysis and also kind of the synthesis of expanding the Apollo collection with the lunar meteorites and what we can learn about that, and defining creep-free versus creep-bearing differentiation trends of MG Suite. On the next 2, I'd like to thank Louise Proctor and Dave Draper, who gave me a shot, selected me for the inaugural Gordon McKay postdoctoral fellowship, jointly between the LPI and NASA Johnson Space Center. And ultimately, these opportunities, though they were on the precipice of COVID, gave me essentially ultimately led to my taking the oath of office and joining the NASA family. And this was an opportunity of a lifetime for someone like me. I grew up in a small town, South Dakota, and growing up, I didn't even know enough to dream of something so big. And this is a picture, a moment, impromptu moment. I was called into a meeting one morning, had no idea, but it sounded serious because it wasn't on my calendar. And about 20 minutes in walks Bert Laws, director of the Exploration Architecture Integration Science, and chief scientist Eileen Stansbury, presenting me with an award for the work we did on mantle overturn. And that was a huge surprise, but I can't tell you what an honor it would feel like to have that. Maybe if we have a little more time, but another big shout out to all the people at NASA, my NASA family, I feel, XPET, XI3, XI2, XI4. But in particular, I want to give a shout out to Justin Filiberto and Liz Rampy, who were both acted as my direct supervisors at the time. And I felt an immediate and an intentional and a genuine passion for my career development from both of them. And it was hugely important to me. Recently, I've gotten involved with the Lunar Exploration Analysis Group, and this has been a really fun learning experience for me, and such a wonderful team of people that are all dedicated to doing the same thing and making lunar science present and accessible to the community. But I do want to highlight both Amy Fagan and Tim Glotch, who behind the scenes have really helped me transition back into academia and navigate kind of my unique pathway through my career. They've been instrumental. Thank you. Lastly, my favorite rocks, my family, my wife Kelsey and our son Parker were there through the thick and the thin and supporting me all the way. And of course our dog Declan there too. And so I'll just thank everyone again and helping me stay in the fight.